to introduce Lynda Pauley. I've known Lynda through her class that I took at the Springfield Museum. It was a watercolor, well, she's a watercolor painter. No, you're everything painter. Oh,
Not a watercolor.
No, I was a watercolor painter. She was basically, I don't know, I guess I had some challenges, but she was a great help. So everybody, let's do a big hand for Lynda Pauley.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynda. Take it over.
Okay. I'm going to give you the opportunity to move if you feel safe to do so. So I will step aside all I can, but I do have to be in front of it to paint. So if you feel like you can't see, feel free to move up, as long as you feel safe doing that, and everybody around you does. Pat, I was hoping you would just tell them everything, but I'll start. First of all, I am so happy to see artists. I feel like we've been in prison, and I took good advantage of that year to paint probably 10 to 15 pieces, because otherwise I would be insane more so than usual. But I did have to stop my classes, which I teach 3 days a week at my studio and in South Vienna, Ohio. I did have to stop last March, and I'm getting ready to start in April, so it'll be very limited amount of people, but we're all really excited to be together again. So, and with the vaccine, thankfully, we're starting to feel a little safer, I think. Not that we still can't get it, but at least we can go and do something. So my prime mediums are oil and pastel, and drawing, and sculpture. And I started out as an equine artist, and I went to many national horse shows, including in Canada and France, and displayed my work. And then was fortunate enough to get divorced, so I had to go to work. So the art kind of got put aside, as most people's lives do. You know, you do something and something interrupts it, and then you do it again, and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I was the art school director at the Springfield Museum of Art for 5 years, and I really loved that. I met Pat there and many people. And before that, I was the gallery director at Indiana University in Kokomo, Indiana, which I'm from Indiana. And so I've had some really good jobs with my art and enjoyed that administrative side of the art business quite a bit. I think I like to boss people. But anyway, today I'm going to do a pastel demo. Does anyone do pastels? Oh, good. Wow, quite a few. Okay, so this is really my main medium. I've done this probably 50 years, way before you could get lessons. But I saw pastels in the art store and had to have those. You know, you see some, that's so beautiful. And the only instruction there were books and experimenting. But it is, as many of you know, pure pigment bound together with a binder. And the more binder, the harder the stick. The less binder, the softer the stick. And it works just like oil paint. How many are oil painters? Okay, about the same number. So unlike watercolor with oil and pastel, you start with the darks and go towards the light. And that's one reason I don't do watercolor, is because my brain can't adjust to the opposite thing. I decided when I tried watercolor, because I loved watercolors, that it would take me a year of not doing what I like to do to learn watercolor really well, and I decided, nah, I'll just stick with what I do. So I teach watercolor at my studio, pastel and oil, and love doing that. While I'm on that subject, I do have a sheet up here that if you're at all interested in getting on my class mailing list, please fill your name in on this sheet and your email address. And then I'll put you on my email list and you can decide whether you want to come or not. Now, for a while, it's going to be a very limited class of 5 people. But I can usually take 7 or 8 people in my studio. So, I gave you some information about the supplies, and I want to briefly go through the supplies so that you know kind of what it takes to get into this. I don't think there is a cheap art medium that when you start, you've got to have enough materials. So you need a set of hard pastels, which are called the new NU pastels. And that is your first layer on the paper, which is what I have right here. This is what the beginning, what I call an underpainting, looks like. You can see lots of paper. It's a little bit of all the colors. It's so dim in here that you're not able to see it. And so that set will last you your whole life because, and you can draw with them. They're great for drawing. But you really only use them for the underpainting. And because they're hard, they skim over this little bit of rough surface and don't dig into the paper. Pastel's a very light touch medium, not a scrub on. So that way, if I decide I don't want that halter on that horse, I can still take that off or paint over it because it's so thin on there. I could adjust the drawing. You know, I can do quite a bit. It's a much more limited medium than oil in that you have to be much more careful the farther along you go because oil paint, you just let it dry and paint over it if you don't like something. This gets so you can't erase it, and you need to be pretty sure what you want before you start. Okay, so another set of pastels, which would be your biggest set that you would want, that you can actually go from this to finish, is a set of Rembrandt. And I call them a medium hard or just soft pastel because they're softer than the new pastel. Years ago, I couldn't afford the really handmade pastels. I've got a lot of finished paintings. My set's Grumbacher. They no longer make those, but Rembrandt is an equal quality pastel and easy to get. So you would want the most colors with that set. And then the icing on the cake would be a handmade pastel, Sennelier. There's several different brands now. Pastel has really bloomed as popularity. It didn't used to be popular because it's on paper. And now we have acid-free papers. Years and years ago, they did not, so the papers would fail and the painting would fail. But there's a lot of, Mary Cassatt, those paintings are old. And even today, you wouldn't want to hang your pastel in sunlight. It's true of any work. Now there are a lot of papers. I still use mostly the Canson Maitiens, which is an acid-free paper made in France. It has a rough side and a smooth side. It comes in lots of colors. It's the best if you like to work detailed and fine work. And that's what I have the new painting on. And this painting is also, I believe, I don't remember for sure, on Canson paper. The other finished little painting is on Art Spectrum Color Fix Smooth. I wanted to try a coated paper, it's called, and they come like really high grit sandpaper-like, and you might as well just throw your pastels away because it eats it up like it's sandpaper, literally. And now there's many of those to work with. They're very different than Canson paper. They load up really fast with the pastel, but you can do many, many more layers. Now, there's pros and cons to that because I've seen many artists who just won't stop because the paper will let them keep going. And often you have passages that are so beautiful, you need to, slow down and stop and leave it. And a lot of people have trouble stopping. Other people don't know when it's finished and won't keep going far enough. So this painting will probably look a little bit different than this. For one thing, I can't paint it exactly the same. But you're welcome to touch this. It feels really smooth, but believe me, when you paint on it, it grabs it. I do not like to use coated paper. I've tried many of them so that I can tell people about them. I don't let my students use it because they're learning. They need to be able to conquer this paper first. Then I don't care what they use. And you're welcome to touch the Canson paper, and you can feel a slight texture to it. The other side has the paper press makes little holes. It's much rougher than this side. It's also harder to paint on, in my opinion, and you're always fighting the paper. And the difference in the pastel work and oil painting is your paper you choose becomes part of your painting. And often, if I plan that, I let the paper be the background. So learning what color paper you want is really important. If you're going to cover the whole thing, not so important. But I don't think I've ever painted pastel on a white sheet of paper. I can't remember ever doing it. Maybe when I can't remember any, so far along behind that I can't remember it. But so, is there any questions about supplies?
Have you ever used pan pastels?
I do not, because I don't rub my pastels.
Oh, because they make great backgrounds.
I'm so against rubbing. I have some that I think Art Supply sent me, and I didn't even try it. Because that little swab is just like your finger. And I like my pastels to look like a painting. I like it to look like brush strokes, like not everything the same texture, the same smoothness, not all rubbed out. And when I teach this, I show people what happens when you don't rub it and when you do rub it, and you lose the magnificent intensity of color when you rub pastels. Now there's a few exceptions. Let's say on this dark paper, I'm going to have this white face, and if I really thought I was going to have trouble, I would, in my very first layers, rub a little bit of that light colors in. So I'm not fighting this dark paper, because you can hardly cover every speck of paper. I mean, you don't need to. Your eye, this is what works with you. I don't have any trouble doing it on that because it just grabs the pastel so much. If I was going to do like a real bright landscape where everything was light, you know, like a seascape, everything's bright, I would use a lighter color, a gray, and probably rub the dark places. Just in the beginning. After that, I never do it. Try not to ever do it. I might tap it a little bit with my finger. I try to go slow, pay attention. It takes the time it takes so that I don't have to do it over again because you can't erase it. So some go in the trash. It's a piece of paper. And it's fairly inexpensive. The Canson paper is only $3 for a 19 by 24. Yes?
Do you do your painting, for lack of a better word, over days, weeks, or do you spend
like
a lot of hours at one time?
Oh, yeah. Like this little painting, 9 by 12, I wasn't doing it for anything. I was testing this paper, and it probably 3 hours. I don't keep track.
The whole thing?
Yeah. This painting, I actually did another one first, and on the coated paper. And it was really interesting because when I got to the one section of the whole thing, the pastel, it refused to go on there. I don't know if it was a flaw in the paper, but this is the second one. This is a better piece. This is on, I'm sure, on Canson paper because I know how to use it. But it's such intense, pure pigment that I really, I think my pastel paintings are more beautiful than my oil paintings. But, and I like it. You could just take these and draw with them. You don't have to make a finished painting. If you have a beautiful sketch with some color lines, you can leave the paper, a lot of paper showing. You can do whatever you want with it. I like to get them to finish that to the point they compete with an oil painting. And when I used to go to the horse shows, people would, I would listen to them looking at my art, and they couldn't figure out what it was. So that to me was a great compliment. So I'll go ahead and start. Feel free to ask questions.
Do you use fixative?
Never use fixative. Never. I have ruined finished paintings to the point I had to throw them away and start over with fixative. It's a horrible thing to use, plus breathing it. Once you are finished, if you tap off all the pastel you can, see, I can tap this, and some will still fall off. But when I'm completely finished, I'll take the sheet of paper outdoors and I'll actually shake it. I'm very kind to my framer because these are really dirty and hard to frame.
Do you make them?
I have started to come to just putting a spacer between the glass and the pastel. You never want to lay the glass on the paperwork. And I have a really good framer. She's so careful. And so this does not have, but I do have lots of them that do have mats. It just depends on how I want it to look. And yeah.
I see a brown edge around that.
That's part of the frame.
Okay.
But there is a spacer behind the glass, between the glass and the paper.
That has a glass on it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it has glass. You have to frame them with glass or plexiglass because they never are permanent. They're always, you know, you could run your finger across it and it's pretty ruined. So you have to have a framer that knows how to frame a pastel. This is one thing about pastels. They're expensive to finish because you can store them without being framed between foam core with some glassine on top of them forever. So if you've got some that you want to keep but you don't want to frame it, or you want to frame it later, that's how I store mine. And but you have to have a little space between the paper and the glass because it'll mold. You know, we have a lot of humidity here, and paper has to move. So your framer will only tape it at the top so that paper can move back there with the humidity, and it's just a characteristic of paperwork. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is start to get some Rembrandt colors on this to start building it up, and I'll probably use Sennelier more just for time's sake, of which I don't have a watch, so somebody will have to tell me.
It's 11:03.
Oh, wow, lots of time. Okay. So what I would do is, and I'll paint and try to step aside.
Excuse me,
Yeah?
did you photograph that?
I did down at Kentucky Horse Park.
No, the one you're going to do.
This one?
Yeah, how did you get that?
I did this one from my photograph,
Okay.
and I can't find the photograph. So I'm painting this one off of that one.
Yeah, but you've got it sketched on there.
I have it sketched bigger. I don't care about that.
Yeah, I know that, but how did you do that?
I drew it.
You drew
Can you
it.
freehand?
I freehand drew it. If it's extremely complicated with lots of figures and size and space is difficult, I will grid. But I just drew it
And
freehand.
you use pastel to do that?
I used a pastel pencil,
Okay, I see, okay.
but that's the only time I would ever use a pastel pencil. They're a waste of money because at the end, when you would really want to use them, they won't come off on there. They're so hard. They're hard as rock. So they're fine for drawing. They would be fine to drag a line. Once you got a lot of pastel on there, you could take a pencil and drag some of that pastel out, you know, real fine. But a kneaded eraser will do that also. You can make a little point out of your eraser and drag that. See, it'll just drag it along. I have every color pastel pencil. I probably only get them out to sign stuff or draw with them because I've just learned they won't do anything. So what I want to do is get some of these darks in here, and which is most of the picture. So I'm not going to be real careful. I'm a fairly slow painter because you can't change it very well at all. So you can see how much darker. Of course, I'm pressing down and I have a much bigger stick. And I'm trying to get just a thin layer going, so, and paying a little more attention to what's happening. Now, it's amazing how much pastel will layer and make new colors. So you can blend new colors. It takes some time to learn how to do that. But for instance, where it's really dark, that's not just black. That either has dark blue or, you know, some other color, dark brown, whatever I used. Usually on top of it, so it's not just a black hole. So you want your darks first. Why is that? I'm a teacher, so I'm going to ask you stuff. Why is it important to get a lot of the darks in? No.
Because it covers up your other colors if you.
No.
Later?
But your highlights always dark. It establishes your value.
Yes. You can't read your middle values and your lights if you don't have something to compare them to. And so with oil and pastel, almost every artist I know that paints with them, we start with the darks. So we have a base, a dark, even though it may change how dark it is, to balance the values of the middle and the light values. Now, I did not bring a very big set of pastels with me, so I'm really, and an hour is not very long to get much done, but we'll see.
Do you always stand when you're doing this?
I rarely stand.
You sit at a table with them?
I'm too old to stand up for hours. I sit. I have a beautiful easel that cranks, you know, and I usually sit, and my chair has wheels, so I roll back and look at it, and then I roll forward. I don't even get up. Most of my students stand up, though, 2.5-hour class, and they're welcome to sit if they'd like, but you really can see your work better if you stand up and step back, you know, work, get back. Occasionally I stand up, but hips and feet aren't what they used to be. Yeah. So I'm using light gray blue because I want to save my lights. Because it's really, there's very little bright. And I'm being very thin and sketchy at this point because it's a medium that builds up.
Have you ever used the suede?
The what?
Suede?
Oh, absolutely, don't ever buy that. That's Elvis painting. That's the cheapest paper.
It's expensive stuff.
You mean the velvet?
Board, like the suede mat board stuff.
Suede mat board? No. First of all, you want acid-free surface. And that you can try it.
Well, I've seen a lot of YouTube and a lot of people have done it.
YouTube is everything.
I think we had someone here that did colored pencil, and they used that suede. They suggested.
I can understand that,
the colored pencil.
how that would pull that pencil off. I don't need more pulling off. These come off easily, and that's why the coated paper is difficult. So one thing I like to do a lot is get a lot of color underneath, a lot of layers of color under where the color is. Now it's unfortunate that you can't see what I did up here because I had blue and orange and several colors of burnt sienna, and so now I've got dark and I've got a middle light. Now I'm going to put some colors in because I need to see that, knowing that further layers will skim over that and make a new color, or those colors will peek through my strokes of the next layer. And I can be a little more strong with it than what it needs to be if I know I'm going to put it somewhere where it's going to be more on top of it. So that's what distinguishes my work from a lot of people that paint horses and animals, is because I use a lot of color. Colors that you wouldn't see if you have a brown horse, a photo of a brown horse, you don't see much else than brown. But as an artist, you want to put blue and red and gold, and green, things that makes it art, makes it come alive. I like to say, you want to plan a painting that when your work is hanging on the wall with 50 other pieces, everybody wants to go over there and look at yours. That's how you win a competition. So you may have something you really like, and if the photo or the subject isn't real dynamic, but it's a good composition or something you love, make it pop. You're the artist, you can do that. So I use pink and blue and lots of colors, and yet because it makes it glow, and if people love to look at it, you know, maybe they'll want it. So you can already see just putting that little bit of light orange, how that attracts you to it now. And then this face, there's a lot of blue. I'm going to go a little overboard so you can see it. It's probably a little stronger than I would do if I was doing it not for a demo. But I want you to be able to see it. It won't hurt it anyway. It might be prettier than that one. So I'm looking for shadows with this bright blue. Why would I put this in the shadows? This bright blue color.
Are you asking us?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Well, maybe give it some reflection in it, so it's not so dark.
Not so flat.
Yes. But why would I choose blue? Why not gray?
Blue has more vibrant. Gray is kind of flat.
True. I'm waiting for the answer I'm looking for, though.
She wants the right answer.
I want the right answer, yeah. You didn't know you would have to work. If I have to work, you have to work.
Well, because you're seeing blue in it, I guess, in highlights and shadows.
I see it.
That's what I'm saying. Is it your favorite color?
No, it is, but no, that isn't the answer.
Is it some psychological thing?
No, it's an art technique that everybody knows.
Obviously, we
Not you guys, but
that class or something.
The cooler?
cool recedes, warm comes forward.
Forward, yeah.
And so therefore, I can put intense shadow colors that recede, and they still will. Does that make sense now? So if you see warm against cool, the warm always wins. Always wins. That's why you have to be careful with red and yellow, because it can ruin your painting really quick. Okay, so now that I have some shadows, some bright shadows, look what my paper does, because it's neutral. Okay, I have this, I'm going to set these medium soft aside. The Sennelier, I have the whole set, and my opinion, once you use it, you can't paint without them, because they are so vibrant. It's like the icing on the cake. Now, this is not far enough along. I wouldn't let one of my students stop here and go to Sennelier, because they can't do it.
I just spelled it.
It should be on your sheet.
That's number 4.
Oh, I see.
They're made in France. It's a very, very old company. You can buy half-stick sets. These are half sticks. I don't like them as well as the full stick, because they're not as fat as these. I also rarely do I use the side of the pastel. I rarely ever would take and use this side, because there's no control. Now, if I wanted to smear it back here, I'm going to do that. But when I'm painting my subject, I always use the tip, because I have more drawing control. All right, so next layer, we're going to pretend like I got that really far along. Next layer would be the soft pastels. There are many brands. I haven't used all of them. They cost a lot of money. Everybody has their favorite. Sennelier is mine, because there's not a darker black made probably than Sennelier. So I'm going to start with the darks again. And establish those really deep places, so I can bounce my middle values and light values next to that and see. Now, I'm not going to press down, because I don't need to with these. They go on like butter. They are extremely soft. See the difference? See my fingers? But if you want real impact with pastels, you're going to want really intense colors. And oil paint's the same. If you want impact, you need to buy really high quality paint and use really good surfaces. It's cheaper in the long run to buy expensive paint. Does anybody know why?
Less of it?
You use less of it because it's intense. It's highly pigmented. You know, we all do what we can afford. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you can afford to start supplementing some cheaper brands with really good handmade oil paint, you just won't believe the difference in beauty. Never, ever in any medium buy student grade anything, because it's so full of fillers. That's how they make it cheap. And I've had students bring in student grade paint, and you couldn't even mix it. It was like glue. It was so saturated with fillers. And so what a waste of money. You know, she really had to buy all new paint.
Do you use walnut oil or anything?
I use linseed oil. It's the most proven medium to not yellow over years. And I use paint that's made with linseed oil. I use Vasari oil paint, handmade in New York. It's really not that much more than a high grade you can find at Dick Blick.
Sorry?
Vasari.
Sorry.
Yeah. Vasari, I believe. They send me bags. I order for my students, you know, because there's a $100 minimum. And so when they have a sale, all my students order, and that way we all get a deal. Okay. Work on that.
I've got another question I need to ask for me, but you did the dark in the medium soft, and now you're doing the dark in the soft.
Very lightly.
Yeah. You mean the other underlayer?
Well, you can build up like 10 or 15 layers on this paper. This paper was endless. Well, it finally just starts falling off because it can't hold
But
it.
the medium soft will show through the soft as well?
If I paint it that way, now if
You could cover it up.
I can cover it up easily, but you know, I'm trying to not, because I have a lot of color I want to get in there.
Right.
I'm going to get some of these dark greens in. Just so it gives it some dynamic. Now, I like to have some background color before I finish a piece so that it also affects my top layers. Now this painting I did the background entirely last because I didn't think the gray background did anything for it. Why did I pick that ultramarine blue, almost purple?
Almost finished the first 3 feet.
Makes the
It
work-
does all that. That's not the answer though. I mean, I could use any color. It's a black and white horse.
Is that the other side, the color loop?
Yes. So that horse has black and white. Those aren't colors. Those are just neutrals. It has orange. It has orange. And blue is the complement to orange. So, no brainer.
And then his nose is kind of orange too.
Yes, that's why. So I'm going to put some in right now. And I'm just going to use the side for time's sake so we can see what that does compared to this ugly gray. I do use just the paper occasionally. And once in a great while, you'll do a painting in pastel and plan the paper. I have students that this happens to. They want the paper to be the background, but they mess up their piece, and so they don't have any choice but to paint the background. Or if you grid, which is fine, you've drawn on the background, you have to paint the background. The background is equally as important as the focal point. So don't dismiss your backgrounds. they show off your focal point. So color choice, texture, distance, the perspective, all of that is in consideration. Now this was a pretty difficult piece because all the color choices are the same. And the reason I paint for all these years is because I never learn everything. Every painting is a wonderful challenge. There's problems to figure out. There's color choices. There's all those things to work out. Of course, the more paintings you do, the less you have to think about it, some of it. But to make a dynamic piece, one that you can enter in shows and have it be seen and do well, that's a big challenge. So I never wait till time for the show and try to get a painting ready. I'm painting all year the best I can, the most dynamic I can, so they're ready. That's such a stress reliever to just paint the best you can all the time. And be selective. There's nothing at all wrong with messing around either. But if you like to go into competitions, which evidently your group does, do that all year so that you're not stressed. I don't see many paintings done real quickly that can really compete. Occasionally, you do your really good work because you're free if you just zip, zip, zip. I did that one really fast. I think it turned out pretty good. All right, so for some weird reason, my Sennelier, I've used up the white, so I don't have one. Anyway, I'm going to put some other soft colors in here just to start to give it some roundness, some depth, some interest. Not just black and white. These are so extremely soft that you have to really hardly touch the paper. And there's no way I can go my regular speed in a demo. You would never see anything get done. Okay. I don't have to do it just like that either. I mean, it'd be fun just to make it different. So I'm going to get some of these blues in this.
So did you study horse anatomy?
I had horses as a kid. If you brush a horse enough, a million times, you learn that. And I've always loved art. I've always painted and entered 4-H. And I wasn't an art major in college. Well, I was for a while, but I didn't get I got a minor in painting because I didn't like the art department. So you can see how the blue is giving it some roundness, not just these big black spaces, because there's bones. I'll tell you one thing, if you really want to learn anatomy and how the body and the skeleton works, is do sculpture. Holy smokes, it is so hard. And I had to get books out and look at the muscles and look at the bones so that my piece was correct. I've done 3 sculptures. I've taken 2 really good workshops. The only reason I don't do much of it is it's horribly expensive. Horribly expensive. And the equipment it takes. I thought that my fingers wouldn't be able to hold up. Surprisingly, kneading that clay and keeping it soft helped my hands. And I thought it would be just the opposite. How's our time now?
11:30.
Oh, geez. All right. What kind of artist am I? Didn't bring white. It'll be all right. So I'm going to go take this harder one, a Rembrandt. It's light blue. That isn't exactly white anyway. And I'm going to skim over this. To start to get, and some of that color will come through because remember I used pretty intense colors under there. And I can still go and put colors back in. Besides, it doesn't have to be just like that. So this is one way that you make a new color is you skim lightly a neutral color over them to all those things that I put on there are now a different color. So it's starting to have some depth. All right, so I do have a really light yellow though. I'm going to use it and get some of the really bright light stuck on there. Now, I tried to time my drive to here, and I sped as fast as I could, but it was about 45 minutes. MapQuest says it's 55 minutes from my studio.
In Springfield?
No, I'm east of Springfield, about 13 miles on Route 40. Yes, east of Springfield on Route 40. Yeah. Well, it wasn't bad. You probably wouldn't want to do it in the winter, but I don't know where that is.
Greene County.
Greene County.
I have people, well, Marcy comes. She lives a good hour from me.
Marcella Road?
Yeah, she comes because she had never really done pastels and oils a lot.
On 72.
East of Senior.
Yeah, southeast.
It's probably too far for a lot of people, but I have had people from
Maybe South Charleston.
it's past that. It's between Springfield and Columbus. I'm almost equally can go to Columbus as I can Springfield. 70 and 40 run parallel along that eastern route. And
40 used to be 70.
yeah. So I'm trying to get a little bit of light put in with some colors. It's going to be a little overload compared to my other one, but that's okay.
Are your background colors on those two, they're different, right? Because one,
I think I layered a couple colors.
yeah, because the other one's kind of purpley.
Yeah. I don't remember what it was I did, but I can, I probably had my whole set, which is 500 and some colors, so I probably picked something I liked and used more than one. So I can still do that. I rarely use one color without, so whatever it was I picked, it was pretty intense.
Is the dye of the pastels, is that anything, like, you know, when you do watercolor, sometimes you have to use rubber gloves to use gaps and stuff.
You mean safe?
Yeah.
If they're made in the United States, they are required to be safe because, you know, they're cadmiums and some of those pigments are dangerous. If it's made in another country, there's no guarantee for that. So I never use gloves, but I wash my hands a lot. I'm 74, so I haven't croaked yet from them. And I've used these for a long time. Now, not every day. If I did this every day, I would wear gloves. And I have a really good air filter. Probably be a good idea to wear a mask if you painted pastel every day. I don't know too many women that are able to do that.
What?
That's what we used to wear masks.
Yeah, we are now.
Yeah, now I'm going to require people in class now, till things get better, to wear a mask. So it's the way things are. All right, so this area has lots of paper showing through, and because it's so light on dark, I am going to pat that a little bit just to get that. I'm not going to scrub it. I'm just going to kind of pat that into the paper just to help me get rid of that paper. That part I don't need to touch. So I'm going to put a few strong things in now, just so it starts to pop off of that blue.
It's interesting, the white face is showing white, even though you use those other colors.
If we had brighter light, it would be brighter looking.
No,
But-
it's reading as white.
Yes.
You know, even though you put blue or put yellow.
Well, that's one of the keys to using white is there's very little real white. So you want to save pure white for the little tiny highlight. Most white is green or gold or blue or, you know, that's some other gray. When you come up and look at this, you'll understand why this is really a short time, because it looks unfinished and messy, because it is. But it gives you an idea of the steps put a little bit of more blue in this. For one thing, I don't know how many of you do portraits, but the color of your background is the air color. The air color. So whatever color the background is reflects onto everything else. So that's why you see a lot of portraits with green reflection or blue, because for one thing, the skin tone is in the orange family or pink family. So green is the complement. That's why you see so many backgrounds in green, soft greens, dark greens. But then, whatever the person has on, there's reflection. Whatever the air is, there's reflection. And that's true of animals and the barn, whatever you're painting.
She did a class on how to make your paintings wild. And
What did you paint with?
I was watercolor.
Oh, you brought whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah, it was the class was how to make your paintings go wild.
Yeah.
And some people were doing acrylics oil, and I was doing watercolor.
It's all the same thinking.
I did a picture of my granddaughter in a ballerina dress looking in the mirror. Taught me things about the background.
Well, I think it's been 12 years since I worked there. Now, that may have been after I wasn't working there. I don't remember. So,
You did a special class.
yeah.
And I'm working on an oil right now, and my linseed oil is really thick.
It's old.
It's just old.
Often, if you pour your linseed oil in a jar so it's easier to use, and the jar gets a lot of air in it, it gets thick. And you
You can't do anything.
well, you can thin it with turpentine sometimes. It doesn't always work.
And everything's looking real shiny.
Then you're using too much. You really should paint with as little medium as possible. And never, I was trained to do an underpainting with turp, and then we used real turp. Now I can't breathe that. But then, today there's so much science about, the paint bonding, and you really should never add turp to your medium. We always did. We always mixed it. I don't know that I'll abide by that, but I would say your linseed oil, put it in a smaller jar and just add it more often, so that there's not a big bunch of air, because it's important to have nice. I know, but the air in the jar does that, and if it's old, it just thickens. So I'd say you need new. Yeah.
Okay.
Is it done?
Yeah.
All right. Any more questions?
Yes, you've only done 3 pieces of bronze.
Uh-huh. Thank you.
We were just talking about that because we've got them all here. What's the process that you use to do that? I don't know anything about that form of art, except that I like to look at it.
Well, I've taken 3 workshops because I knew nothing. I had a friend that's done huge life-size bronzes and stuff. And so I took a workshop to learn to build an armature. Well, get your engineer hat on, because the armature is wire. That's the skeleton. So everything has to be measured. So what I did was a drawing, the size I wanted my finished bronze to be. It was a horse. Let's say it's a horse or a little girl. So I do the size, The Prairie Girl is 18 inches. And that way I could hold that drawing, or I could actually lay the wire on there and build the armature the size I needed. But it's difficult to build an armature. So then you use clay. Oil-based clay never dries. And you build it from the muscles out. So like this is from, the bottom out. That's where you need to build those shapes of main mass muscles. And believe me, sculptors, they know the name of every bone and muscle. I mean, yeah, it's like, oh, I'm not going there. So then I took a workshop from a person I admire that does Western cowboys and horses and stuff like that. So I went to Utah and took from him, and he was a very good teacher. That's where I learned. I applied the clay also in the armature class, but I learned more about the art scene in the next one. So I already knew how to do the armature. I built the armature, took it with me. So we learned a lot more about how a sculpture needs to move, because they can just be stunning if they're not stiff. So there are no straight lines. I didn't know that. And then I went one more time to Utah again, to a sculptor who uses water-based clay, which you have to wrap up and keep it wet overnight and spray it. It's much faster. It has to be fired. I don't have access to that. It's probably a more flowing, artful clay than oil-based is. And his work is magnificent. Leroy Transfield, if you want to look him up. Magnificent work. He's from New Zealand, but lives in Utah. So I still, want to do some sculpture, but the casting is a whole nother thing.
Now, do you take it somewhere?
I take it to Cincinnati. They make a mold. That costs you a big bunch. Then they take the mold and they make another mold of ceramic that they can pour the hot bronze in. It's an engineering feat. It takes months to get that done. And it's very expensive. So I decided I can't afford to do that because I don't have anybody knocking on my door buying them. But
They're beautiful.
I have sold the Prairie Girl. I've sold 3 of those.
So when you put the clay on, you don't fire at that point. You take it down and they make a mold.
They make a mold off
Don't worry
of.
about it blowing up. That would really be.
Oh, right. So water-based, you have to fire it because it'll just dry up and fall apart. But the oil-based, they make a mold, and when they take the mold off, all that work you did is destroyed. But that mold shows everything. If you have a fingerprint on there, it'll show. Yeah. So that's hard to do, is to, here it is, and it comes back like with the head off, and like, they just rip it apart because it's done. So then all you can do is you don't have to cast in bronze. There's a lot of different materials that are cheaper, and probably if I ever cast another one, it won't be in bronze.
Well, I love both of them. I love the Prairie Girl.
Thank you.
So you save your mold?
I own the molds because I paid for them. I can make, probably 30 pieces. But I am not out there marketing myself. I actually took my website down. I teach. I'm happy with that. I've got stacks and closets full of paintings and stuff. So it's like I could never paint again, but I'm going to. But that was a new thing to learn. It's very challenging. We had models that we worked from. It was exhausting. I mean, it was standing on your feet for 8 hours in a workshop.
When you were younger.
No, that was probably 5 years ago. It was exhausting. Yeah, most of the people are young, so they've got lots of years to practice.
Is there a connection between your bronze?
The oil painting, the Prairie Girl, I did first.
Okay.
I love stories about pioneer women. I like stories about strong women, and I've read probably 50 diaries from the pioneer women. They're really wonderful stories. And I had an old photograph that you could hardly see anything. And that's what that painting is from. And it won Best of Show at the Springfield Museum of Art. I think it's been 10 years ago, maybe. And then when I went to the workshop, I did the armature in hopes to do the bronze of her, but I wasn't sure it was dynamic enough, and everybody thought it was. So, but I learned a lot about the posture, because all I had was this really old black and white photo of her. You couldn't even see the feet, and everything was, you know, one value almost. It was so old. So I had to experiment bending the back, and I had to go take pictures of dungarees, which are not the same as they were then. So I do a lot of research, even for my paintings.
Well, thank you. That's
Use your own
Okay.
face for the girl?
It looks like it.
I don't know, but you know what? When you paint portraits, they tend to look like you. No, really, that's the truth. The sculptor that I took from, the other sculptor told him all of his sculptures looked just like him. He was doing his own face. Well, whose face do you see the most? Your own. You know, so it just kind of works that way. It wasn't intended.
Okay.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Lynda.